Good evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Clarice Raza Sharif, and I'm the Senior Director of Literary Programs at PEN America. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening conversation, a joint presentation by the New York Public Libraries live from NYPL and PEN America. PEN America's mission is to unite writers and readers to celebrate creative expression and defend the liberties that make it possible. We believe and champion the free speech and the freedom to write. This evening, we're kicking off the fall season of our flagship conversation series, Pen Out Loud. Special thanks to our series partners, the Strand Bookstore and Scripps Presents, a forum for the current colleges and audiences across Southern California. Welcome to whoever is joining us from California. Thank you for joining us. It was my great pleasure to collaborate with my colleague, Faye Rosenfeld, Vice President of Public Programs at the New York Public Library, and her whole team to bring us all together tonight and honor Wole Soyinka, a giant of world literature. Wole Soyinka was the first African writer to receive the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1986. And I believe, if per my father, that he might the same year have presented one of his plays in my homeland, Martinique, at an annual cultural festival hosted by the great poet Aimé Césaire. So I think I was a little girl and I might have been in the room. But today, of course, was also the announcement of the 2021 Nobel laureate. And my colleagues at PEN America rejoiced at the news that Abdul Razak Gurnah received the honor for his extraordinary contributions to literature. And for our guest, let's turn back to our guest of honor, Wole Soyinka. He's an author, playwright, poet, and political activist, whose prolific body of work includes The Interpreters, his debut novel, and Death and the King's Horsemen, a play that was first performed in 1976. Soyinka was twice jailed in Nigeria for his criticism of Nigerian government, and he famously destroyed his US green card in 2016 when Donald Trump was elected president of the United States. In fact, his last appearance at Live from NYPL was the very day after the election. It was an emotional night for sure. But tonight we're here to celebrate Soyinka's first novel in nearly 50 years, Chronicles from the Land of the Happiest People on Earth. He will be joined by Farah Jasmine Griffin, who is the William B. Ransford Professor of English and Comparative Literature at Columbia University, where she also served as the inaugural chair of the African American and African Diaspora Studies Department. She's a 2021 Guggenheim Fellow and an Andrew Mellon Foundation Scholar in Residence. She's the author and editor of 8 books, including Harlem Nocturne, and her most recent book is Read Until You Understand, The Profound Wisdom of Black Life and Literature. And I happen to have both books and I just have to show them. Please support our writers and definitely get your own copy. And also, since we are hosted by NYPL, if you have an NYPL library card or live in New York State, you can borrow these books for free. And then if you're able, you can buy the books from the library shop. I believe there's a button for buy books at the bottom of your screen. There are lots of programs coming up at Live from NYPL. Check the website for the full schedule. So before I turn it over to tonight's speakers, I have a few housekeeping items, and I promise we will leave the floor to our guest of honor. Even though the video and chat are on nypl.org page, they are hosted by YouTube. By participating in the chat, you might share data about yourself, which the library does not control. So for more details about Google's privacy policy and the library's privacy policy, you can turn to the event page. If you have any questions tonight for both of our speakers, please put them in the chat. We will certainly make sure that we get to as many questions as possible at the end of the program. Real-time captions are available, and you can click on the closed caption button, and you will use the stream text link to access the transcript. So now, without further ado, please welcome Wole Soyinka, and Farah Jasmine Griffin. Good night and enjoy.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And I am just thrilled and honored to have been asked to be in conversation with you, Mr. Soyinka, this evening. I know this has been a bit of a whirlwind for you, so thank you for making the time to be in conversation with us here this evening. Earlier today, as Clarice mentioned, we learned that Abdul Razak Gurnah won this year's Nobel Prize in Literature, making him the first African writer to win the award in more than a decade. It's been close to 35 years since you won, becoming the first writer from the African continent to win the award. I was wondering if you had anything you'd like to say on this occasion of his being our most recent Nobel laureate.
Well, for me, the Nobel, literary Nobel, has merely returned home. But I must thank a new club member for taking the trouble to bring it back to the continent, where it's been quite comfortable, but it's been sadly missed. So thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to meeting our new club member. And this time, let's try and keep it in that continent for a bit longer. That gap has been too long. So welcome once again and thank you.
That's so gracious. Yes, maybe we can talk about some, the extraordinary writing that's going on, that's coming out of the continent, that will help ensure that the Nobel stays there. But I wanted to make sure we jumped right into this extraordinary novel that you've written. The word exhilarating kept coming to mind as I was reading it, because I just felt like I was on this whirlwind myself. There's just so much and it's so exciting, and it feels like a literary adventure. You have written in every genre, excelled in every genre, from drama to poetry to the essay to the memoir to your political writing, as well as the novel. But it's been some time since you chose to publish a novel. So I wondered, why the novel? Why now? Why did you return to that form?
Well, my first remark is just to remind everyone that my proper métier is the theater. That's why I feel most creative, most comfortable, and most improvisational. And creativity is very much all about improvisation. The novel, when I wrote the first novel, The Interpreters, you know what I call it? I said it was not really a novel, it's just a happening, using one of the theatrical terms. The second one, I can't remember what excuse I had for writing it. I've honestly forgotten. It's that first one I remember. This one, I insist on saying that it's something which has been bubbling in my mind for a very long time. And so this time I favor the expression that it was a novel whose time had come. There used to be an advert like that. I think it was a wine advert.
Yes.
Something, wine whose time had come, something like that. So this is just a novel which could no longer be repressed, could no longer be suppressed because of the tumultuous happening all around me in my own society. In fact, I sometimes think that this novel literally wrote itself. And all I did was just juggle things around, put it together, and present myself as the author.
So what were those kinds of tumultuous things that wanted to be expressed in this novel? What were some of them that had to come out?
I think a word that would sum it all up, unfortunately, is social deterioration. Watching one's own environment in which one grew up, from which one drew one's inspiration, developed one's values related to other people, other sectors of society, whether as individuals or as groups, whether you're defining them by religious groups or ethnic nationalities, or just communities. Just watching all that decay around you in a most violent way, not even a sort of gentle slide into decadence, but violently. A devaluation of human life, the jettisoning of all the various, even the modicum of ideology that is conceded for the engineering, the social engineering that is necessary for society. So it says, you could call it the ascendancy of religious fundamentalism, homicidal instincts, everything. And so it could no longer, all this could no longer be accommodated by the theater, by polemics, polemical writing. And the bubble had to burst and spatter all over the place. And only the prose form, the fiction form, could contain that spattering.
That's fascinating. That's a fascinating answer. And it makes me want to go back and reread the novel now that I've read it with your description of its genesis. It makes so much sense. Following a little on what you said, and without giving away too much of the novel, because I want to leave some mystery there. In your treatment of ritual, and in particular here, the kind of ritual use of body parts to acquire wealth, status, power, it's somewhat satirical, somewhat absurd, but so close on the precipice that one could almost, see this, us leading in this direction. I wondered if you might say something about the connections that you draw, and the novel is expansive enough to allow you to do this, between a kind of political corruption, a kind of you almost have a kind of religious, spiritual industry. It's not just fundamentalism, but it's almost an industry that seems to be related to what you're saying about corruption, and then about the combination of those two things, what those two things, how they contribute to this decay. I think there's a line in the novel where you say it's almost something at the soul, the very soul. So was there this effort to bring together that relationship between corruption, this kind of rise in fundamentalism, which is the object of satire here, and that decay of the spirit or of the soul?
Well, one could, first of all, one could go into causes, probable causes, because there's so many, one doesn't know which one is dominant. But I think the United States will find, American readers will find a familiar chord in what that novel depicts. Because there's a country that very nearly lost her soul, a soul that she had scrambled after centuries of moral corruption. And by that I mean a failure to come to terms to sections of its own community, to admit, accept, and relate to that community in an egalitarian way, in a way which in fact tries to obviate the pains of history. I'm talking about racism in the United States. I'm talking about the lowering of the value of the African American and some other minorities, because it's not just African Americans. All of that, which has been accentuated by, I think, a misplaced confidence in the nation's own integrity, which has always been a collective case for questioning. Mm-hmm. You had an instance where, I'm sure I maybe jumping the gun, it all sort of burst out in the movement, which is now universally known, Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. So American society has always been a contradiction, an internal contradiction within its own borders. The same thing we are experiencing in Nigeria today. We can pinpoint certain issues in Nigeria, the sudden access of wealth. We can pinpoint a civil war that is quite avoidable, the marginalization of groups within the entity, the national entity. We can pinpoint the permissiveness that allowed even a valuable, whether I'm not a religious person, I'm spiritual, I think, but religion itself has a value. And you watch it debased in our society and certain other parts of Africa, but the same way as it's been commercialized and debased in the American continent. You have the glut of wealth, which is not properly distributed, which is not justly distributed. So all these various contradictions continue to devalue human life, the human component that makes any community, any society, any nation, any so-called nation. I find so many parallels between the negativities of both societies. And that's why I think it'll strike, that novel will strike a chord among Americans, white or black, or indeed any nationality.
No, absolutely. I mean, you actually did precede my next question, not even a question, but an observation. And that was that though this is set in a fictional nation, African nation that, has resemblances to Nigeria, that as an American reading it, I saw so much of this nation in what you were describing. At the level of corruption, at the level of the corruption of religion, the relationship between certain forms of fundamentalist religion and the rise of an authoritarian leader, the lack of value of Black lives, but as you say, not just Black lives, that Black peoples in this country are the canaries in the coal mine. And so I do think that this book will resonate with readers, both in the United States, but I think in all the Western democracies who certainly see their own societies undergoing very, very similar things. And so one of the things that I was going to ask you is right now there is rightly a sort of celebration and just excitement about the release of this novel, about hearing from one of our most revered writers. What do you anticipate will be the reception of the novel as time wears on, both outside of Nigeria and within Nigeria? Do you see those receptions as being similar or different? But what do you anticipate the reception to be?
Well, the first confession, which is a reality, is that I think of all my works, this is the one which I have very consciously and perhaps even savagely, almost vengefully directed at my own society. And the proof is this. I hounded my Nigerian publisher, made his life a misery to ensure that that work came out in October last year in Nigeria, because that marks the 60th anniversary, independence anniversary of that nation. And I wanted a very sour gift for my own society, and I wanted it on as part of its celebrations. The government, in fact, had already announced that it was going to celebrate the 60th anniversary for a whole year. It was going to be a year-round celebration. And I said, I must make sure that that book is celebrated together with everything else, if they found it worth celebrating. And so we managed to get it out, just the Nigerian edition, in time. And guess what happened?
What happened?
All right. I've already given it away, actually. But the book, fortunately, was just coming out by the time the government made its announcement that it was going to prove to the world that we were the happiest people on earth by celebrating for 1 year, for a whole year. I think that scheme was scuttled. And I have a feeling, this part of the arrogance of we writers, I have a feeling that the appearance of that novel at that time may have had a little bit to do with it. And another reason is this, you're talking about the reception within Nigeria. Do you know that it's Nigerian politicians who were the most fervid patrons of that work when it came out? Some of them even attended the launching in Abuja, the capital of the nation. They were among the audience. Some of them even asked questions. One of them, who recognized that he could have been one of the models, actually came, on which the character was based, actually came to the podium to ask further questions. And I said to him, I hope you realize that I have to thank you for providing the basis of this particular character. You say, oh, I know. And we went on discussing. And that's actually surprising, well, not too surprisingly, has been the reception within Nigeria, across, of course, more than just the politicians. And outside, I know that Nigerians were scrabbling to order their copies from Nigeria, since it was not published outside as yet.
Right.
So I believe that even mere curiosity, in addition to self-recognition, is making this book quite acceptable, at least intriguing,
right,
to my compatriots. Thank goodness for that.
Thank goodness for that. But there's also there's also perhaps just the excitement of seeing oneself in a Soyinka novel, no matter how much you might be satirized.
We are very vain people. So as long as we are talked about and we are presented publicly, one way or the other, I think we have a way of riding even the negatives. And that has been our problem all these years.
In what way?
Oh, that's the exhibitionism, ostentation, love of titles, recognition, deserved or undeserved, no matter what you've done. Yeah. Taking chieftaincy titles after you've been exposed as being a robber, a white-collar robber, a political robber, after you've been exposed in a way that will make many people just hide themselves, and just move out of public life. In our own case, such villains, they just go to their villages, take chieftaincy titles, and come out again and start manipulating themselves back into the positions from which they were disgraced. You see, it's all this which just made it impossible for me to use the medium of plays, poetry, however sarcastic, and anymore. It just was too overwhelming.
Well, the novel gives you, it's capacious enough so that some of the points, the greatest points of satire and humor in the book are even around titles and how people get titles and how they choose to title themselves. I'm thinking in particular of the character Papa Divina, inspired by Father Divine. And a moment of diasporic connection.
Well, I'm very glad, that people, interlocutors, bring this humor, however dark, up from time to time, because I didn't want to create a totally bleak picture. I caution myself from time to time, don't lose your sense of humor. Lighten it up a bit. And also make sure that we do not lose sight of the positives in that society as represented by some of the characters there. And even for some of the villains who may be presented as being not altogether satanic, but redeemable. So I had all the time in the world when I finally got working on it. And by that, I mean, I was locked down. The final spurt, the major work took place during the lockdown when I was totally isolated, just me and my characters. And I was able to do with them what I wanted while they did their best to drive me insane, just from immersing myself in their shenanigans. So it was quite it's a long party.
They're a fascinating group who came to you during the COVID pandemic. Indeed, they're absolutely fascinating. It's interesting because there is so much humor, and the humor, though, is allows for the most kind of biting critique. At the very moments of some of the greatest humor is the most biting critique. And there's also this, on the one hand, one of the things that is up for satire is this notion of the happiest place on earth. And I kept thinking about the very word happy or happiness, you know, in the American Declaration of Independence, the pursuit of happiness. Americans were promised the pursuit of happiness. And the very pursuit of happiness is such a problem here. But the relationship between happiness and humor in this novel, I found fascinating, because humor is absolutely necessary and most enlightening throughout the text. So thank you for the humor.
Thank you. That's how one survives in that place. In fact, I remember one journalist wrote a small book at the time. You've got to cry to laugh, or was it? Yeah, you've got to cry to laugh. It was a famous journalist who, I'm afraid, and he used to be a very progressive one, but he also joined in the end. The society seized him, captured him, and there he was on the side of one of the most villainous, thieving, murderers, torturing dictators that we ever had in that country. So it's that merry-go-round which creates works like that. That's why I keep saying it wrote itself.
There in a lot of profiles that have been written about you, articles or discussions, the writers will make a distinction between the activist and the writer. They will say there's Soyinka the activist and Soyinka the writer, and often present them as almost being warring. I've never felt that. And I wondered what you thought the relationship is between yourself as activist and yourself as writer.
Probably summed up by a love-hate relationship, which is perhaps why some people from time to time actually do detect two parts of the same entity. Because I'll be honest with you, I try to be anyway. There's a part of me which hates my compulsion towards activism. I've used the expression before that I really am a gluttony. I'm a glutton, I beg your pardon, for tranquility. That is the truth. And yet I keep getting myself into these activist roles. I mean, I'd rather just stay with my typewriter, now a laptop, of course, and dialogue with fictional characters, even while reflecting, of course, actuality, commenting on it, signifying on it, critiquing it, celebrating where necessary. Given a choice, that's what I'd rather be doing, to the exclusion of physical and programmatic immersion, to the detriment of the exercise of my imagination. But ultimately, you're right. The two parts are so meshed inside one person that I cannot, frankly, imagine one without the other.
What do you think is are there similar compulsions, similar drives in that which drives you as the artist and that which drives you as the activist?
I think all human beings have both parts in them, both the creative, what I might call the creative innocence, and then at the same time, within the same body, there is the corrective, if you like, or exploitative, depending on your profession and on whose side you are. All within the same person in very different proportions from, let us say, the proportion in which I find myself, which is almost 50-50. With one side going up at one time, the other coming down, like a seesaw. But most people, they manage to control the minor aspect of them and go all out for that just kind of productivity, whatever it is, whether engineers, doctors, masons, real estate agents. I think all human beings have these various components in them. But something pushes some of us over the top, tips us over the edge, the dividing edge, onto one side more than the other.
The fiction, the plays seem to be motivated by a similar desire for a certain kind of society that the activism is motivated by as well.
Yes, there's no question at all about that. And that kind of society, unfortunately, is one which these days I describe not so much on ideological terms, but almost like a sequence of negativities. For instance, the society, which I say is one, in which it is impossible for 300 school pupils to be kidnapped, taken into forests, traumatized, abducted, literally turned into a new kind of slaves. Since what the kidnappers do is raid schools where we have sent our children to learn. So we've even made things easy for them. They don't now have to go out and raid villages and capture slaves. No, the slaves are all there in schools, ready to be abducted. And then their parents and institutions and governments have to go and bargain for them and buy them from slave markets inside forests. Now, that's the kind of society which I do not envisage. I do not envisage a society in which corruption is taken as the norm, the new norm, to use this ugly expression from COVID. I do not expect a society, I do not envisage a society where it is possible almost routinely for one person or a group of people could kidnap another, just cut them to pieces and make ritual out of their bodies as if it's the most normal thing in the world. Now, all this was not so when I was growing up. So obviously, the opposite is possible. But there's a complacency, there's an increasing acceptance of what should not be. So these days, I seem to describe the kind of society I envisage as a society that is not.
Yeah. What do you imagine has to be done to counter that? I mean, it's to counter going in that direction. Is it possible? Are we already over the precipice? Is there no return? Do you imagine, if not a return, then the creation of something new?
Oh, yeah. There is politically, first of all, we're moving into politics now and political structures. That country has grown too large and complex for a centralized governance. It has to decentralize so that governance is closer to people and the people feel part of the governance. Right now, there's a kind of alienation. I've never known a society. Usually, it's power that is alienated, governance that is alienated, that no longer feels it is actually part of the entire committee of humanity, of human beings. The people have become alienated, totally alienated. And so one of the first things, in my view, and in the view of many, many Nigerians, by the way, in fact, open the pages of the papers any day, and you find one word, restructuring, which equals, during exposition, decentralization. That you've got to bring people back to a consciousness of their own responsibility for themselves, not some remote, exploitative minority caucus at the center. Additionally, however, what do the people themselves owe to themselves? I think we need a series of indaba, a series of community conferences made up of psychologists, the religious people, the genuine article, not the papadavinas, historians, mythologists, even sociologists, economists, a continuing, not just meet once, go away, write papers, present papers, put all those papers away and forget it until some crisis again. We need an ongoing internal discourse. It looks arcane, perhaps, I don't know. But right now, a combination of those two, I think, might just pull us back from the edge, from the precipice. Because right now, I believe, and I'm not saying this outside, I believe we're tipping over into a crisis of total anomie, of social anomie, slipping into a brutal existence from which we may be unable to pull ourselves back.
I feel that you're talking specifically about Nigeria, but I think that so many of us need to listen and hear what it is you're saying, because I think many of us feel that way even here in the United States and other parts of the world. I wanted to, this is a return to the novel. It's a bit of a speculation, but I think it also feeds into one of the kinds of alternative ways of organizing and thinking that the novel presents, your novel presents to us. There was something that struck me throughout and that has remained with me since I finished the novel itself. And that's your portrayal of friendship. Friendship in all of its complexity. The friendship, the book is dedicated to many people, to a few people, but it is dedicated to your good friend, Femi Johnson, who you write about in You Must Set Forth at Dawn. And some of the most beautiful writing in the novel, a novel full of exciting writing, some of the most beautiful writing that I kept going back to and marking is writing where language is given over to discussions of friendship. Not in a romanticized or sentimental way, and not even in the way that we think in the beginning it might be going. But it seems that in this novel, friendship provides a kind of alternative way of being, an alternative way of organizing ourselves, of realizing our humanity, an alternative to the way you present governance, the way you present business, the way you present religion, even the way you present biological family. There's something about friendship. So I wondered if you could say something about the notion of friendship in this novel and beyond, particularly in relation to some of the more obvious concerns of the novel.
Yeah, I think generally people tend to undervalue the family that one creates oneself. I mean, you're born into a family, you can't help it, you didn't ask for it, you couldn't choose. But as one attains maturity, and even before then, even from childhood, that feeling of bonding, which is outside collegiateship, professional association, collaboration on specific ventures, the love of the same things and so on. Just friendship, the bonding between human beings. For me, this really is the central plinth of society. That ability and the ability to recognize and to slip into it in the most natural, unforced way, so that there's confidence that you're relating to another human being in a way that you can never be betrayed, in which there's absolutely no possibility, and you don't have to look behind your shoulder. I think many of us owe a lot of our sanity to that very rare acquisition to say somebody, yes, is a friend. You can fight, you can insult, abuse each other, you can even go sometimes, say go your way, I go my way, but you'll always come back. It's something which I think I've been very lucky with, to be able to count, at least on one hand, no less, that I've been able to say, yes, this is a friend. And so any opportunity I have, I will celebrate it, because somebody can say ideology, and I say, yes, sure, but first, friendship. Yes, that's the kind of person I am.
Mm. It's one of the many gifts of this novel is the reflection on friendship, even, that the kind of friendship that the ties exist beyond life, even, even after. I wondered, when you were talking about, feeling most at home in the theater and liking the sort of creative improvisation that's allowed by the theater. In some ways, that was stripped of us because of the pandemic and because of the lockdowns and the shutdown. So, but do you look forward to getting back to that kind of creative improvisation, the collaboration of the theater, now that it looks like things might begin to allow for it?
Well, it's interesting you should ask that question, because after hibernation, that exhausting hibernation, which lasted, I think the final sprint took about 4 months during that lockdown period. After that, I wanted to do things. I wanted to pick up my gun and disappear into the forest for a while and have a long bout of hunting with my fellow hunters. It's one of the few hobbies I have. And the second thing, but that was difficult at the time. But the second thing that came to mind, and on which I actually embarked, was to do a production. I went to Lagos, and there's one young, really talented director. And I said, I think I'd like to do a production using your company. And she was very delighted. And we actually began the first reading and auditioning. Along the way, however, something happened, which I won't disclose here, but it be disclosed in a rather unpleasant brochure, an occasional publication, which will come out before too long. And I just got disgusted with creative effort. And it was like, wait a minute, is this what happens even when one puts oneself out to bring something to life, something genuine, something which becomes, which really exits your body, your brain, your soul as an integral part of you? Is this what happens? And so I pulled out and I said, you carry on, you do it on your own, I'm sorry. Which I regretted very much having to do, but I just found I wasn't in the mood, and I couldn't recapture the mood in time to be able to plunge back into rehearsals the way I usually do, full time, full bodied, fully committed. So yes, you're right. Mm-hmm.
Has that ever happened to you before?
It hadn't happened on such a level before. It was something really terrible which happened. And it created such a negative and murderously negative mood in me. Let me just put it that way and leave that topic alone for now. I don't want to go deeper into it. You'll learn about it in good time.
I hope that it hasn't soured you on the enterprise altogether, and that we will be seeing something from you soon or again.
Yes, well, I'll look forward to it, because I always itch, especially if I walk past the theater or I go and see a play. My fingertips start tingling.
Then that means you must be doing it, that you should be doing it. Yes. I think that it's time for us to turn over to Q&A. So we'll open up the question and answer and see what people have to say. I could continue this conversation with you forever. Thank you so much. Okay. So it says, what was your favorite book to read in the last year?
In the last year, Hmm. Oh, there have been several. I have no favorites. All depends on what. And sometimes I read several at the same time. You heard about Nigerian go slow.
Yes.
I'm sure the infamous Nigerian go slow when you're stuck in traffic for hours. So my car has been turned into a library, you know, most of which is consumed during those go slows. So I read several at a time. I have several books there, and depending on the mood and the prospect of the go slow. And I'm trying very hard. Before the end of the conversation, I'm sure there must be one which I can single out.
Okay. It says, so we'll come back to that one. It says, you are approaching 90 years old. Do you intend to stop writing at any point?
I think maybe as an internal device for temporarily escaping that question. I suddenly remembered one of the favorite books in the last year, which I have enjoyed enormously. It's by the Turkish writer Elif Shafak, and it's called The Island of Missing Trees. Yes, I suddenly remember that. All right. Escape time over.
Yes, okay.
Answer your question.
Okay, the island of missing trees. Okay, that is a way of skipping over the 90-year-old.
So I'll answer your question now.
Yes.
If I am back on another novel, I think I deserve to be categorized as a closet masochist. And anyone who says he or she expects me to write another is a sadist.
Okay, all right, we'll take that. We'll take that. But you didn't say that about writing a play or poetry. It's the novel in particular that would make.
Yeah, the novel in particular, yes.
Okay.
No, poetry. Right. I think I'll just scribble a poem or two from time to time. Yes.
Okay, so we can still accept that. And then someone says, can you describe your reading diet? I'm not sure I know what that one means, but describe your reading diet. I think you did. You said you read several books at a time. You're reading several books at a time.
My reading style.
Yeah.
It's mood. It's dictated entirely by mood. But of course, there are some works in which once you begin, you want to finish it. Then there are others in which you want to you select those books and you like you like them beside you, around you, because circumstances do not allow you during that period to begin and run a read continuously. So there are certain books which permit you, in which continuity is not lost, in which you can actually take it by section and even decide, I want to stop now. So it's a mixed style, no, not any single style.
Right. Do you think the current situation in Nigeria and many parts of the world that made you choose the novel over other types of literature like theater or poetry is catalyzing in younger writers that use literature to express criticism against the system, like it has been for you from your earliest works? So do you think the current situation in many parts of the world, including Nigeria, is catalyzing for many younger writers to use literature to express criticism?
Yes, and don't forget that we're not talking of the full-length novel alone. The short stories also, pithy, short stories, we just take little vignettes of reality, whether positive or negative, in which you can just contract what might otherwise be a large statement into a cogent piece of prose. So the choice is always there, the choice.
Someone asked about your next project.
Next project.
Yes.
You know what my next project would be, if only I were a little bit younger. I would take up architecture and or music.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. And why? Are those are interests?
Well,
it about
it's the two disciplines in the humanities in which I've always been interested. Sometimes I describe myself as a frustrated musician, other times as a frustrated architect. It's only those two disciplines. Oh, the third one I've forgotten. In recent times, since space exploration began, I describe myself as a frustrated astronaut.
Okay, so you know you're going to have to explain those three frustrations. What is it about space travel that that you find interesting or desirous?
I have no idea. All I know is I even set my alarm to watch space launches, and I follow the process of all the various terrestrial bodies hopping all over those planets, several light years away. I know the Explorer, Curiosity, Surgeon. I even wrote a long poem called sort of tongue-in-cheek poem called Space Odyssey. I wrote that after I managed to wangle a ticket and experience weightlessness in San Francisco at NASA.
Oh,
and it was donated by a certain organization. And I made sure I was fit and ready, and I couldn't wait to experience zero gravity, then moon gravity, the lunar gravity, and then there was Martian gravity. You should try it sometime. It's a sublime experience. So don't ask me how I drifted into that, but that's the way it happened.
Well, then might you join one of these billionaires on one of their flights?
I sent a copy of that poem to one of these moguls who's shooting people into space, and told them that if they think they can use an octogenarian who will come back and write about it for them, they should let me know that I go into training anytime. I'm ready. So I'm saying it again.
You're saying it publicly. You're saying
publicly now. I'm ready anytime.
It's out there. Okay. Here's another question. You mentioned earlier that there are always two parts in people. This is when we were talking about the activist and the writer, the compulsion to activism and to writing. So this question is, can you elaborate more on what you mean by that? On there are always two parts in people.
All right. Let's take, for instance, this disaster, this catastrophe I spoke about, which agitated me, still agitates me till today. And that is the kidnapping of the Chibok school pupils, a feat, a crime that has been repeated again and again with other schools, the youth. And I wrote a long poem, which I titled A Humanist Ode to Chibok and Leah. Leah was this girl who was among the kidnapped in another school, Leah Sharibu. This girl, when it was time for them to be released, the negotiations had gone on, and the kidnappers, these fundamentalists, about to release them, they were all told they had to convert, even after they collected ransom. And one girl said, no, I cannot convert. This piece of heroism so moved me, in addition, of course, to the rage, the anger, that these children, these youths have been put through such horrible phase of existence. So I wrote this long poem, which has been published. At the same time, however, I ensured that in my state and some surrounding states, that we took practical measures. As a citizen, before I'm anything else, I'm a citizen. I'm just a human being like any other. That we now took certain proactive steps to ensure that this abomination was not inflicted on us. So that's activism. But it's just two coins, two sides of the same coin, I beg your pardon. It just shows that, for me, both things come from the same impulse. Now, the difference, what I was trying to explain earlier, is that some people, they can sublimate their anguish, their anger, through one or the other. And that offers sufficient release. In my case, I find that I need to address it from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference.
That's the answer. That's an extraordinary, exquisite answer. I won't let you off the hook from your frustrations. And going back to being the frustrated musician, you have a beautiful character in this book who has diverse taste in music,
Mm-hmm.
and and a real relationship to various forms of music. How would you describe your own relationship to music? Do you play an instrument? Do you listen to music while you're writing? Do you have a preferred genre, form?
My relation to music is actually almost that word again. Okay, a masochistic one. The reason is this, that I find, and that's been going on over years, that I compel myself not to listen to the kind of music that affects me most, because I will find it. I know what effect music has on me. Music is a great tempter, at least the kind of music which I love. Folk music, jazz of all kinds, classical symphonies, and original compositions by new, young composers. And I find when I listen to that kind of music, reality sort of rebukes itself and rebukes me, and one sinks into a kind of spiritual lethargy, which can absolutely take you away from actuality. So that's why I say I find it punitive. So over the past so many decades, when I'm writing, I no longer listen to music. Before, I used to. At the end of it, I don't want to do anything else but continue writing and listening to music. So I had to take a decision, frankly, and reduce my music consumption to an absolute minimum. I hardly ever go to concerts these days, but then I don't even get the chance. So what am I talking about? I'm too busy doing other things.
Well, I wish you in the coming days and years, whatever it takes for you to continue to gift us with this extraordinary work. I won't say a novel because I don't want you to call me I would be the sadist. I don't want to say it. But whatever writing comes to you and wants to be expressed through you. And I hope that you will return to music, but not in a way that is frustrating, because you write so beautifully about characters for whom music means so much. There seems one last question, and then we will close. Black writing in the diaspora seems in a good place at the moment. Could Mr. Soyinka comment? Any comments on Black writing in the African diaspora at this time?
Very, very robust. In the statement which I issued earlier today to celebrate the new Nobel laureate, I mentioned the fact that in recent weeks, I have been subjected to numerous interviews, Zoom conferences, and so on. And that one of the easiest, if not one of the easiest, in fact, questions which I find, which I'm confronted with, the easiest has always been any question about the health of the arts and literature, especially on the African continent. Very easy to answer because it's always an opportunity to boast about literature from Africa, from the diaspora. It is one thing at least which has been a triumph over dire circumstances on the African continent. And after this award, people will now accept, my audiences will now accept that I do not exaggerate. I said that just this morning in my statement.
That's a perfect place for us to end. Thank you so very much for this time and for this wonderful conversation. Thank you all for joining us this evening.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much.
Good night.